Hi, everyone, and welcome to Stoked, the ultimate Star Trek online podcast. This is episode 124. My name is Chris, and I want to say good morning to all of the fine folks in the jblive.tv chat room. We'll be doing this on Friday next week, so join us Friday, 5 p.m. We're moving it for this weekend, next weekend. But it's been a big week for Cryptic. Not so much in the news headlines, but definitely in changes behind the scenes. And changes that I believe will injure an already limping community. And I'll talk about those in the news roundtable. Also in the news roundtable, I'm starting to come to the conclusion that STO is facing a problem that's a lot bigger than a mysterious Season 6 or a broken PvP system or the lockboxes, which appear to be our distraction du jour right now. The bigger problem is Perfect World, and it's not something that can be fixed with a patch. So I'm going to talk about that in the news roundtable as well. So stay tuned for that. But if you want to get your hands on some new mission content, well, the Foundry Files guys have your hookup this week. They know you're itching to blow some stuff up. We did a diplomatic mission last week. This week, it's all about the torpedoes, baby. We have an awesome Foundry Files for you. So stay tuned for that. We're also doing another Talk Trek segment. We followed through on some Jem'Hadar episodes that we thought might tie in great with the reruns in STO right now. And we'll talk about those in the Talk Trek segment coming up towards the end of this week's show. But before I go on, I have an announcement to make. I'm extremely excited to announce that Jupiter Broadcasting has launched a new show. And it's our most ambitious show ever. It's called Unfilter. It premiered Monday, May 21st. And what is Unfilter? Well, I'll tell you. It is our show that's going to get the story behind the story. We pull out and get away from all of the political crap and all of the news spin. And we just talk about issues like people. And really, it's news that matters. The real stories. Our first episode was on cannabis prohibition. And we've got some fascinating data in this episode that I think you would love to hear. For it or against it, I think you want to check out episode 1. We did on cannabis prohibition, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Unfilter will be releasing every Monday over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Early Monday morning, so that way for you commuters, if you check your feeds before you jump in the car, you'll have a great new show to listen to. I'm extremely excited. And a couple of new faces on the network are joining me on that show. Also, before we go on, I should remind you that you can help support and sponsor all of these shows by using the affiliate links over on our website. If you go to jupiterbroadcasting.com and scroll all the way down to the very bottom of the site, all the way down there, you'll see links down there for Amazon US, UK, Newegg, which a couple of people recently have gotten some really nice rigs off of Newegg. I don't get any identification info, like who buys it, but I get to see the parts that sell. Oh, man. So Newegg, ThinkGeek, Best Buy, Mint.com, Audible.com, and Gamefly. We also have a Chrome extension. If you grab that Chrome extension, it just automatically tags your shopping session when you're there. You don't even have to worry about the links. So thank you to everybody who supports not just this show, but all of the shows on Jupiter Broadcasting by using those affiliate links. All right, well, enough with all of that. Let's jump into the news roundtable. To kick around the news, we're going to do some unfiltering ourselves this week. There's actually not a ton of news, but there is enough that we want to cover. So Mav's joining me, and we're going to kick around the news old school. First up, Mav, let's talk about something new that hit the game this week. It is obligatory. Yeah. There is a new species that you can purchase.
Yep.
Called, I'm going to try to get this right, the Phrasins?
Phrasins.
Now, these are a KDF side character unlock, and they appear to be essentially a reskin of the Cations.
Yeah. A lot of people not real thrilled that it was a reskin of the Cations. Basically, it's a darker, more gothic with vampire-like fangs Cation available on the KDF side.
Yeah. I'm not a big KDF player, so it doesn't really impact me one way or the other. I'm not compelled to buy these, primarily because these are not a species in Star Trek that I know. I play this game to remember and experience the things I love about Star Trek, and there's so much to draw from. Why make something up? Like I guess kind of what I wonder is, were these meant to be the Zenketti? How do you say these guys?
Zenkathi. Zenkathi?
Yeah, these were a great villain in the animated series of Star Trek. And these are a cat-like species that I could totally see being folded into the KDF because their homogeny wouldn't have been able to succeed through a powerful KDF campaign. So maybe these were intended to be these and they didn't get the approval? I don't know.
It's
a little underwhelming.
Yeah, it's a little underwhelming, and considering the other plethora of species that are available that are known, it's just one of these things where it's like, okay, we now have cute cats.
I see several people in the chat room saying that Cryptic couldn't get the license for the Zenketti, so maybe that's what the issue is.
It probably is, and a lot of people are recognizing now more than ever that a lot of what goes into this game, if possible, has to go through so many licensing filters. It's like, well, we would love to just put everything in there, but we have to get permission every time we come up with something, and then it has to be a certain way, and it has to look a certain way and act a certain way.
Well, and we don't know why Cryptic didn't approve it, or why CBS didn't approve it. Perhaps they weren't happy with the result. Perhaps they said, that just looks like a reskin of another species or even game. It doesn't make them unique enough. We don't want them representing that species. That's a possibility. Also, I would propose a radical concept that perhaps they should have considered. If it doesn't live up to the standard, if it's not Trek, and it doesn't, and CBS didn't meet CBS's approval, maybe the proper course of action is not to release it. Because to make something great, it's just as important about what you don't put into it that you do put into it. And when you put something in like this, it sort of lessens the overall value of the Star Trek IP in a sense. Because this game is supposed to represent the continuing evolution of the original Prime universe. And there's so much to draw from. This is not a limited resource pool. There's so much to draw from that if you can't draw from something that makes the cut that can make it into the game, I'd say it's better just to leave it out. In fact, I would say that it shows prioritizing earning profit over a cheap reskin is more important than adding value to the Star Trek IP, which I think fundamentally betrays a disrespect for the Star Trek IP on Perfect World's point. Because I would be completely willing to believe that this had nothing really to do with Cryptic, and it's just they have a window of releases they need to make from Perfect World, and this is one of the items on the list that Perfect World wants to see done. And I think it shows a disrespect for the purity of the IP. Am I overreacting?
No, you're not. No, I completely agree with you 100%. There is so much to draw from. Why make it up? Now, I understand in being unique and creating a newer experience, you'd want to bring something new to the table. But then again, the Pah-Wraiths, it just
I would disagree. I would say their role is to take something like the Zenketti here and tell us what's happened between when we saw them last and now and how they got here. And that's a unique opportunity that Cryptic could take advantage of that I don't believe has been explored a lot. And it's just kind of been completely ignored in favor of a cheap reskin. And it feels cheap. You can tell it's cheap. Now, that said, if I'm a KDF player, I'm not completely against picking these up just because they have some interesting abilities. They're sort of almost like a +1 character.
Kazinti, not Zenketti. Sounds like you're talking about pasta.
I know. It's because I swear in the animated series they referred to them as the Zenkethi, but I'm getting them confused with another race.
Right, with something else, right.
Yeah. So I mean that's essentially my thoughts on these new characters, the new kittens as the chat room has been calling them, and I'm now getting in the habit.
The new kittens.
Yeah. Should we move on to the next story?
The emo dark kittens. Yeah, we'll move on to the next one.
Now this next story is full of speculation, rumor mongering, and outright. I don't know. I don't know. I just want to make a full disclaimer that this next news story will contain a lot of speculation on at least my part, and I don't know about you, Matt, but somebody noticed, and I had no. Oh, wait, maybe we should back up.
Yeah, let's roll back to what.
Right. So the lockboxes have become the distraction du jour, as I'm now calling them, and
yes,
I know you're on board. I've seen some of your comments. There's there's always been some sort of shiny that we all fight about that keeps us distracted from the other issues in the game, and it's generally it's not a completely unfounded cause. So the lockboxes have been brought up a lot in the STO forums, but also a lot of people seek forums outside of the Star Trek Online forums because the community policies are so stringent there. And one of those places is our fleets forum. We have a large fleet, and we have a public section where people can talk about STO. And there was discussion regarding the lockboxes. And Bordicus, Jeremy, is a member of Jupiter Force. He founded the show, and he's remained a member of the Jupiter Force. And he acts now as not like an officer role, but just as like a general player. And he comes by and socializes from time to time. And he stopped by and commented in a thread about lockboxes. Am I getting this all right so far, Matt?
So yeah, you're on par so far.
Now, what people don't know about Jeremy, you might have picked it up if you watched a lot of him on STOked. But Jeremy is a no drama person, especially in forums and internet communication. He's very cut to the matter, fact of the matter. This is how it is. No sugarcoating, because it's boom, boom, boom. We're doing it. We're doing a data exchange, and that's it. I mean, Jeremy was the one that put the #1 policy in place for Jupiter Force: no drama, no drama. Right? That's a big part of him. And so he replied with a very nonchalant answer that said, if a country has legal issues, the game might not be available in that area instead of us removing lockboxes. Somebody took that comment and ran to Massively. And this is where the disappointing part comes in for Massively, because Massively took the comment out of context and ran a headline that says, Star Trek Online dev unconcerned with losing global playability for the sake of lockboxes. Of course, adding unconcerned in on his own. And also, by the way, a dick move not linking to the Jupiter Force site. That's a dick move, too. Anyway, so he goes on to say that Jeremy was unconcerned about players' concerns, which is a fabrication of what really happened.
Yeah. It was a big fabrication. But what happened was they took one line and ran with it. Now, understanding, there are some people who have professional etiquette when it comes to writing, and believe me, this has spawned a ton of different discussions, not only in pro for what Jeremy said, but in con for what Jeremy said. People saying you're taking it out of context.
Well, and also on cheap blogger journalism too.
Well, right. And people are just, some people, here's the thing.
It's a she, I guess. I don't know. He,
she, whatever. It makes no difference. I'm not going to call out any one particular blogger or news style. I'm not going to blame Massively for not controlling their writer. That's not the point. Here's the thing. And people who've been watching any of my posts in either the Jupiter forums or
Stowe forums
or the Stowe forums will see this is how I feel about the lockboxes. Right now, they are completely, maybe completely is too much of a word. They are detracting and becoming a huge,
distraction.
Grab topic. It's a huge distraction. Everybody is focused on, oh my God, the lockbox is this, the lockbox is that. And there are people on both sides of this discussion, and I've said straight out, I'm like, if you want to live in a fantasy land and say the lockboxes are great for Stowe, that's fine.
Right.
I disagree with them 100%. I'm not spending any money on. I did spend money on them once, and I haven't since then. Okay, and what it is it is completely distracting the community from the real issue at hand about content. Everybody is so tied and focused on these lockboxes that we're forgetting about the real issues at hand, whether it be bugs, exploits.
How about we're not talking about the fact that we're not getting details on Season 6, which is leading me to believe that Season 6 is not in a good state. And to that point, I tried very aggressively to get Daniel Stahl to come on this week's episode. Now, to be fair, I contacted them on Wednesday, and I asked if he could come on anytime between Wednesday and Friday to pre-record an interview for Stoked, because I don't believe Season 6 is in a good state, but all I have is my instinct. But I'll tell you something, Matt. I have watched this game every day since Cryptic announced they're making it. Every single day I have watched this game, I have studied it, and I can tell you when something is wrong. And something is wrong, something stinks here, and I want to get Dan Stahl on the show, but he couldn't be made available between Wednesday and Friday to come on.
Right.
But I think what we're seeing is the community is really upset about the lockboxes, but we haven't come to an organized consensus on how to respond to them. And the issue is I don't think the lockboxes are done because they make money.
No,
so
not by any means.
The only solution, it's not... Are they legal or not legal in some countries? While I know some of you want to have that conversation, I believe the discussion needs to be, how do we spread the word that nobody buys any more keys?
Right.
Because the only way to make the lockboxes stop is to buy more keys. And I say that not wanting to deprive Cryptic of revenue. I would just prefer, and I'm sure a lot of us would just prefer, that they take that and they remove that whole layer and just put that stuff in the C-store.
But now here's
let me just buy it outright.
Here's my focus thought on a solution, because I'm not going to sit here and argue about something and say something sucks without coming up with a probable solution for the problem. We understand it's a money grab. We understand, well, the only way to do it is to get keys and spend real money. Okay. At this point in the game, and personally, you don't necessarily have to spend, and I have a feeling an argument's going to be made from Cryptic in defense of the lockboxes. As of right now, a player doesn't necessarily have to spend real-world cash in order to get the keys.
Right.
Yes. There are 9 million EC or more on the market, okay? Or you can farm dilithium and get seed points and then buy a key that way. So you're still not really spending
if you want to spend 4
cash.
or 5 months doing that,
Here is my solution, okay? and this is a two-part solution. For every lockbox that's retired, and I understand they came up with the Lobby store, which is a flawed concept in my opinion, as it is. Okay, because you're still dealing with, you have to get a key to get a Lobby crystal to get it out of the box.
It's also just once again introducing another form of currency in the game,
which I thought they were moving away from,
and B, something that is totally non-canon. I mean, I know Lobby crystals are in the game, and there's some in the show, and there's a reference to them like in Deep Space. To me, it could have been, why not, again, something from canon? Is it because CBS wouldn't let them use something from canon in this way? I don't know. But again, it's devaluing the Trek. We're talking about the Federation where they don't even have money in the first place. So anytime you introduce a currency system, you are fundamentally going against one of the principles in the game. But, you can make that work in the show. But you can make that work in a video game because you kind of need that. And, dilithium kind of makes sense and those kinds of things. But as you add GPL and as you add energy credits and as you add Lobby crystals and as you add STF loot, it just gets to a point where now we have all these different currencies again for a game that almost is breaking canon just to have a currency in the first place.
Now, see, you said something interesting here, and this is one of the things I was going to offer as an option too. You say STF loot. They're always saying about, running STFs is optional, this, that, and the other. Here's my thing, okay? And from experience in the past, understand, yes, you give the player base an option to outright pay X amount of dollars to get the key. My thing is, why don't you have it in the game as an ultra rare drop? Okay?
Yeah.
Give the players an option to grind it if they want to, because since they want you to grind the STF anyways for EDCs or for tech drops, why not on a super rare occasion have it so that the keys will drop? Okay, don't make them very common. It's not like you're going to lower the price of them in the EC. They're still going to be running for 9 million or more.
I don't know. I think I'll tell you something, Mav. And people might think I'm a little stupid for this, but I was going to play the featured episode reruns because I wouldn't mind getting one extra set of things.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see a Dropbox, it bums me out. It not only is it a complete immersion breaker, I mean a total and complete immersion breaker, but it has a lot of baggage when I see it. Well, I haven't gone back since then. That just sat with me wrong, and I haven't gone back to the reruns.
Right, and Nano Lion in the chat room, yes, we understand that in certain countries the lockboxes can be considered illegal in gambling. Move aside from that. That's
what? We should move on. We're sitting here preaching their distractions. We should move on from lockboxes. I think the final word is if you don't want them in the game, don't buy the keys. And until you stop doing that, they're going to make them. And that's we can
go on and on and on.
I think the final word is the player base vote. The player base is voting on this one, and we'll just see where it goes. And wherever it goes, that's what the player base wants.
Right. But this leads into what we actually were talking about. For whatever reason, the devs, not brand flakes, but the devs have gone dark on the forums.
Right. Okay, and everyone should keep in mind, Brandon is a Perfect World employee, not a Cryptic employee.
Right, not a Cryptic employee, a Perfect World employee. Now, somebody said, well, that's normal for the season launches. No, actually, it's not.
Right. Right.
They have been. The community looks to the devs and the dev posts and the tweet leaks as their teaser to, it's coming. Yeah. The concept, it's gone from concept to drawings to from wireframe to conceptual.
You can look at the dev tracker that tracks all of the dev posts, and from the 15th, when that massively article ran, the one that covered about the lockboxes, when that's devs literally stopped mid-conversation in threads and didn't come back until later on when a Perfect World employee posted, or after a certain amount of time, Brandon came along and said, in what was a very Wayun-like post, he said that no, everything's fine, the devs aren't going away. And then they trotted out Gozer, which I hope Gozer wasn't too upset about it. They trotted out Gozer like, look, here's a dev post right here, you silly kids.
They kind of threw that meat and bone like, everything's fine. Come on.
And you know what that is? That's because I'm sure whatever that post was probably approved the day earlier from Perfect World or something like that. That's all we're going to see now. That's all we will see now is Perfect World approved posts. And maybe I'm wrong, but if Brandon wanted to settle that, and I don't mean to pick on Brandon. What Brandon is, in my opinion, the only good part about Perfect World at this point. He gets community. What they ought to do is they ought to promote Brandon up into Perfect World headquarters so he can teach those people how to operate and interact with the community.
I agree.
If he really wanted to prove a point, they should have had somebody from Cryptic post that devs are still be around. Mm-hmm. That would have made the point. But when it comes from the Perfect World community rep, it just kind of sounds like it's what everybody's speculating, that only certain approved posts will be in there. And that is going to chop the legs out from underneath the community, because the dev interaction is one of the keystone, unique, and competitive advantages that this game has.
Yes, I agree.
And it will starve all of the podcasts that talk about this show, including this one, or talk about this game, including this show, especially this show. I've also pressed to have, not only did I press this week to have Stall on, but I also tried to see if I could lock in an interview with Heretic, and I've not heard back on that either. It seems to be that the doors are essentially closed, and only certain approved people will get to come on the show. I'm only left to speculate because they've shut off all channels of communication.
Right.
And I gotta believe this is a response to that Massively article. I'm sure this was the final straw after you've had underwear on Twitter avatars, and you've had posts about this and that. I think the final straw from Perfect World
was that last one, right?
Yeah, and I think there's been an iron curtain.
Right. I think finally public relations has looked at it going, we've got too much information going out unfiltered, and now we're going to start filtering things that go out, and if it doesn't meet our approval, it's not going to go out. But right there, it breaks that bond that the players have had with the devs and the team.
Our chat room right now characteristically would have 1 or 2 Cryptic devs during a Saturday morning. There's no Cryptic dev in here today.
Not a single one. Right.
I think what we're seeing is a fundamental misunderstanding of community from Perfect World's standpoint. I don't think they can put a metric on communities where they can derive numbers and understand how it gives value to their game. So they don't know how to deal with it. What they know how to deal with is data and money. And whenever data and money talks, that's the direction they move in. That's why we see lockboxes, or we see IP stealing cations that are reskinned. I think because they don't understand community, they don't understand what's actually been the major success for this game. And I've never said this on recordings. I didn't actually expect to, but it just proves my point so well that I think I should say it. I've never said it because I've never wanted to brag, because I don't like to do that. But I have very good reason to believe, very accurate reason to believe, that this show has more viewers than the game has players. And the fact that they don't understand how these types of shows like Podcast UGC and Priority One and Direct Radio and STOked are an ecosystem of value that drives people to this game. The fact that they don't understand that number one key ingredient for all of the fundamental success that otherwise has proved to be a lackluster game time after time, yet it continues to have a vibrant community. What other game out there has this many shows about it for something this size?
Right.
And see, this is the elephant in the room, is nobody's talking about the fact that this is a crucial part to the game's survival. And if you cut them off, that to me seems to betray a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes the game successful. And for that to be happening from the very top management level of the game, that to me is a problem that can't be fixed with a Season 6 update, can't be fixed with Season 7, and it can't be fixed with some sort of patch. It's a fundamental issue with the way Perfect World is going to run this game. And just like with Atari, Cryptic Studios is going to have to roll over and take their orders. Even if they know in their heart it's not the right direction.
Right.
And it's a bad situation. It's a rotten situation that is going to systemically poison the game. That they have to figure it out.
I can try to be optimistic and say I'm hoping that this is just a temporary situation until, whether it be corporate orders or, you have to disseminate information through a filter, and we start seeing dev posts again, and we start seeing the dev interaction just maybe a little bit more restricted. That's one thing, and I guess I get it, to prevent problems that we've seen in the past from, and I think what sparked a lot of this, back in the beginning was the bug ship was the Voldemort thing, the bug ship controversy. Then it followed with another, and followed with another, and followed with another.
Dude, it goes back
6 months, 7 months.
It goes back to that community panel that Atari wanted to assemble years ago. It's been fundamental mismanagement and one blunder after another by the parent company. And Cryptic isn't a powerful enough independent studio to stand up and say, no, we have to do it this way. This is, this preserves the game experience. And they're just not in a position to do that. And Perfect World isn't in a position to manage this type of community.
I'm right. And when you say this kind of community, it segues in exactly what I was about to say. I don't think that Cryptic nor Perfect World, and I've said this in public, was ready to deal with the quality, the quantity, and the type of fan base you get when you deal with players of a Star Trek IP. They
maybe
are.
we're dealing with some fundamentally cultural different approaches to business, because Perfect World is a Chinese held company. I know they have US divisions, but when something's said at the top, I think you're right, man. I think you're exactly right.
I just don't think they fundamentally understand that Star Trek fans of the IP are extremely intelligent, intellectual, very well versed on their IP. Oh, believe me, if you get a couple of Trekkies into a room talking about Trek stuff, they know when they're going to call you on your BS when you're trying to cover it up. And the problem is they were not ready to deal with fans that knew more about the product than they did.
Maybe. I think the problem is they think there's more money in making the game a celebration of Star Trek than actually making the game Star Trek.
Right.
Because all of these things they do, the lockboxes and having captains fly around in Ferengi ships, none of it would actually ever happen in Star Trek.
No, not at all.
And that discussion isn't being had, but it needs to be had. And you have to ask yourself, because I keep going back to that comment that Dan made where he says, the long-term survivability of this game will depend on Star Trek fans. And I think Dan truly believes that.
I believe he does believe it, but unfortunately, there's idea and concept, and then there's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe they feel like Cryptic Studios thinks that with these big season updates, they can try to input as much as their take on it and try to make it as Trek as possible and try to make up for it then. But it's almost on a weekly basis, something new is added to the game, or on a monthly basis, it feels like it devalues the property. And it's almost becoming disrespectful in a way.
And there's a lot of people, and you're right, there's a lot of people out there that go, this is so far off base. It's not the Trek that I'm used to. I cannot play a game that fundamentally ruins what it's supposed to be.
And there's parts of it that are still great, and it's such a shame to just not see it go in the right direction. And again, I go back to that's not a patch thing. That's a Perfect World issue.
Right.
I think
that's a fundamental design flaw that unless you rework it, which hopefully, I'm just like every other viewer out there. I want this game to succeed. It's been a long time since I played an MMO for an extended period of time. The longest MMO I ever played was Final Fantasy XIV. I played it for 7 years. My entire married life, I played Final Fantasy Online. This game, I've had friends my whole life. We've come up with D12 board games and stuff like that to try to emulate what this game can do. And it's just fundamentally being destroyed by, whether you want to call it I don't even know how to explain it. The monetizing of the game is ruining the fundamental funness of what it's like.
And JB Viewer One's making, I think, a good alternative point. He says, don't you think that STO has to evolve the IP in order to remain successful? And absolutely. And I think they've done that very successfully. I would argue the Odyssey class is a great example of that. I think there's a lot of things that they did in the path to 2409.
What a great community collaboration the Odyssey was. Why can't we put that kind of energy into furthering other projects?
I go back to the DOF system. Also, Heretic was very communicative on the creation of the DOF system, and I think it's one of the best new and complete systems that have been added to the game.
I mean, it was said, just like D-Shot just said, when they said design the next Enterprise, oh my God, there were so many different ideas and concepts, and people were digging it. And then with the dev posts, here's the drawing that was finally selected, then the wireframe. But this is exactly the kind of communication that is now being censored.
Yep.
So how are you supposed to tie in with your community and respect your community and your player base when you shut the door on them?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a frustrating situation for everybody involved, especially for these shows. And I don't know what it means for long-term viability of a lot of the podcasts. I'm worried about that. We'll see where it goes. Hopefully, they'll open the gates a little more and they'll allow more interaction, and we'll start seeing that pick back up again. But I'm worried we won't. And at a time when things like Season 6 don't necessarily seem to be going well from the outside, and the crafting system theoretically could be in some sort of design phase, and the PvP system is in a design phase, I'd love to see all of this stuff, out in the open so we can interact with it and really make it something Star Trek. But we'll see where that goes.
As a community, we have to bind together and tackle each of these problems one at a time. Right now, like I said, in trying to be optimistic, I'm hoping Season 6, and before I finish that sentence, with other seasons that had released, we knew in advance a bulk of what was supposed to be in that season. We're now less than a month away from the supposed launch of season 6. What confirmed details do we have, if any, that is actually coming in season 6?
Mm-hmm. We just have that one post that Stahl said where you're going to have fleet star bases. You'll have 5 new
And
missions.
that's it.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's what you're going to call a season.
We'll
to
see.
me, very reminiscent of the season 4, season 5 fiasco. And we saw what happened with that.
Yeah. Yep. Well said. All right, Mav, any other thoughts before we move on?
No, let's go ahead and keep moving.
All right, then you know what? Enough of all this downer stuff. Let's get our hands on a great new mission. It's time for the Foundry Files. Welcome to the Foundry Files. This week, Murphy joins me, and we're reviewing the mission Temple of the Pah-Wraiths, which at this point had an average star rating of 4.19 with 2,164 plays, and it's a sequel to a previously reviewed mission, The Worst of All Worlds by Captain Rivero. Right? Am I saying that right?
Captain Revo.
Revo. While Worst of All Worlds didn't receive the best reviews, this sequel definitely has shown higher quality than the previous one, and
much higher.
We both had the whole Foundry team had a chance to play it, but you and I both played it, and we're going to talk about it today. So Murphy, why don't we start out with the story?
All right, so you're originally going into the Gamma Quadrant to go survey a supernova, and the mission starts off with you on the return trip from that. You're doing your captain's log, talking about it. You exit the wormhole to return to Deep Space Nine, and oh look, there's a pile of debris here.
Yeah.
So what really has happened is you have crossed into the alternate reality, which you visited in Worst of All Worlds.
That tricky wormhole.
Yeah, so, and in this reality, it's the one where the Borg are everywhere. They are across the quadrant invading because they assimilated Earth during the Best of Both Worlds episode.
So the Borg have had years to sort of spread out across the Alpha Quadrant. Yeah,
so a quick throwback to Worst of All Worlds is in that mission, you learn that the survivors of the Alpha Quadrant races, Cardassians, Romulans, Ferengi, Breen, and so on, have all allied together because they had to in order to survive against the Borg, because they are just swarming into the quadrant.
They don't have their differences because they have one common enemy.
Yeah, so they had to survive.
Yeah.
So what happens is you're stuck now here. The wormhole is pretty much gone. When you go back to go through it to see if you can get back that way, it doesn't open up. So you're pretty much stuck now in this alternate reality with Borg swarming all over the place. So now your mission is to find a way back to your reality, or be stuck here in this reality that's just swarming by the Borg.
Yeah.
So
I got to say though, when I was playing this part of the mission, I was extremely impressed with just the whole look and the whole surprise factor of it all. It was all very well delivered.
Oh, yeah. It was just great to see. Oh, where's Deep Space Nine? Not here anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So there is one plot hole I do want to hit on.
Oh, okay.
The Borg have assimilated Bajor in this reality.
Oh, yeah. Why would they do that?
Why?
That's
what is on Bajor?
No,
seriously. I think the Borg would either just ignore it or blow it up.
We've seen it established in canon that the Borg won't assimilate anything that doesn't provide some sort of value to the collective because they don't want to ruin their perfection.
Yeah, if they assimilated the Bajorans, wouldn't they just like blow up? I mean, they assimilated Janeway and look what happened to them.
Well,
I mean, assimilating Bajorans has to be worse.
I mean, we should keep going because look what happens at the end of the mission. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. No spoilers though, so we don't want to go.
Right.
But yeah. So anyway, you do go to Bajor. It's been assimilated by the Borg. They have this whole now like new unit complex there. And Terok Nor is there. And it has been completely transformed because the Borg have completely taken over. And it's a really cool thing to see.
You get to see Deep Space Nine assimilated, and it's a whole setup. The whole scene is exciting to see. Bajor cool. Space has been screwed by the Borg.
Mm-hmm. So basically, you'll be going through this mission. There's a whole bunch of references to the Prophets and the Pah-Wraiths, and there is a little workaround from this author to try to get canon characters into the mission.
Oh, yeah?
There are, I believe we were going on. There's 2 that appear in this mission.
Yeah.
That you just have to play this mission to find out because it is a really nice surprise. And he manages to get away with it because 1, he's using Borg names, and 2, he's not saying they're exactly these characters. But
he's inferring.
He's like, I recognize this guy from like history or databanks or whatever. And it's just like, So it's really cool and a nice touch just to see.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, so the story score we gave was an 8.36, and it's our 6th ranked Foundry mission in the story section.
Wow, not bad. Okay, yeah, I found the story to be pretty compelling and a very interesting idea. It's like, what if one really pivotal event didn't go in the direction of the Federation? What if our heroes didn't save the day? And yeah, you see the consequences.
And it just evolves from that to go even more into what really happened at this one pivotal point that just changed everything. It's really great. If you're a fan of story, play this one.
Yeah. Now, of course, when you have an assimilated Deep Space Nine, there's probably some technical tricks that he pulled off.
Of course.
Any notes in the technical section?
Yeah, so you got the great Deep Space Nine. It is just epic. You've got the exterior, which is really great.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at that and you're like, whoa, what have the Borg done here?
Yeah.
And then you got the inside, the promenade, which has been transformed with a whole bunch of Borg walking around and stuff. One problem is, though, that he has nodes that are kind of moving around on the floor on their own.
Wait, that's a problem? I thought that was done on purpose. I thought it was...
They're not supposed to move around. I don't know if it was intentional, but nodes are supposed to be stationary.
Yeah, but I would think the Borg would have little droney things walking around. Yeah.
It is a great idea, and if the author completely intended that would actually be something really cool. Because you would expect, if these are like healing nodes or whatever, they could move around. That could be an evolution of the Borg. So
yeah,
but yeah, as you go through the Deep Space Nine, you keep going into more areas that have been completely transformed by the Borg, and it's really cool maps there.
The Borg Roombas, as the chat room's calling them.
Yeah. So we also have like the great part where a part of this Deep Space Nine structure is a Borg cube that's kind of stuck in between all these pylons, and throughout at a point in the mission, you're gonna have to take out these pylons, and after you take them out, the Borg cube gets released, and then you have to blow it up, and it's a really cool fight.
Yeah.
And in a group that we had playing this mission, a really cool fight.
It went crazy. It was a great fight. There was literally a point where I was up pretty high and I could look down on the map, and I said, "Guys, do you guys realize how many Borg ships are here?"
It was crazy.
Yeah, that's great.
So before we go into that, I guess that was more gameplay. So let's give us the tech score here. The tech score was 7.57, our 8th ranked in technical.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. So why don't we talk about gameplay, because that was definitely a compelling part of this mission.
So there was a lot of optional combat in this mission, both in the space category, where you could go after a few squads. I think we took on some optional squads because, like, hey, let's just blow up some Borg.
Yeah,
it was try these, because we had the cool Cation carrier and stuff, and it was cool to see that fight.
Yeah,
and so you got multiple Borg groups stacking up, which makes it a little bit of a tougher fight. You got fleet battles with the aligned ships to ally you. That's the group that's here in the quadrant now that have
and they really help out, and it's great to see all of these different ships coming in and helping you beat
you
the
got
Borg.
Romulans and Klingons, and it's not just like a 2-on-2 fleet battle, it's like the whole power of the Alpha Quadrant.
And it makes story sense that they would be there doing that.
Yeah, so then so that's our not really much in space gameplay, just a couple of triggers and interactable objects. Ground combat was really good, though. We had there is this one boss you will be encountering throughout the mission, and it's really cool to take him on. And he's one of the people you'll be meeting that could be a canon character, and that's one really cool encounter that we did through the mission.
I gotta say, one of the things that I thought was really neat that the author did, is if you've played some of his other Foundry missions, there's a storyline thread that goes throughout these ones where when you're doing the dialogue during the different chats with the NPCs, there's an extra button that says, if you've played my previous mission, and it names the mission, click this button. And then it sort of expands upon the story for that character that started in those other missions. And that's a great thing. I would love to see more of that in Foundry.
Authors, including myself, I know I've done it, Alamac's done it, a whole bunch of other authors who have tons of missions out there. We just love to throw in references to other series because it's a great way to get them to, if a player enjoys that one mission, to go check out the rest of your missions. And this is a really great way to pull it off.
And I like it as a player because I get a good story arc, and I always love me a story arc.
Yeah, and then eventually you start to get attached to these characters. When you see them again in another Foundry author's work, you'll be like, oh, I remember you. So it's really cool. No real puzzles in this game in the ground gameplay section. You got a couple more triggers and stuff. Good optional dialogue here. We've got branching dialogue used, and that's really nice. You do get a great part for replayability, which might make you go back and replay it, is that towards the end, you do get a choice. And you can either do this or that. We don't want to say it because it's a spoiler, but you do get a choice, and it makes you just feel like you're the Starfleet captain saying, I'm going to do this. I'm the guy who makes these choices. And it's really great to have that feeling in a Foundation.
I probably shouldn't even show the visual of it. I probably shouldn't even
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe not. But
we don't want to spoil it.
No spoilers. All right, so gameplay scored a 7.07. It's our 10th ranked Foundry mission in the gameplay section.
There you go.
So all around, this is a really great mission in all 3 categories: gameplay, tech, story. There's something here for everybody that you will enjoy. I think we had Brooklyn on, who was on a couple Stokes ago, who was just watching this, and he's like, "Oh my god, I got to get into this mission because this looks cool." And that's why we're here doing this, because we want to get you guys to play some missions like this, and this is a really great one. It scored a 7.67, our 6th ranked Foundry mission. This is a really good one.
Please, I really enjoyed it. I played on the live stream before the show today. We brought a few people in from the chat room, and it was thoroughly enjoyed.
It was a blast. Yeah, it was great to play with some of the Stoke fans.
It's a good mission, too, because it was just a fun one to just watch, just to watch the chaos, especially in the more challenging group edition. So
yeah, definitely.
Any closing thoughts there, Murphy?
Yeah, so our original joke of the week, how we do these jokes of the week every week? Yeah. It's actually on our show note. It says joke of the week. We try to throw a joke in.
Sure.
Well, we had to reshoot this segment because we sadly lost the footage, but we had a joke that's now out of date. So, Chris roll.
Welcome to the new Talk Trek segment. Mav joins me, and we're going to cover 3 episodes this week that we thought fit in really great with the featured episode reruns that are going on in STO right now. So, Mav, welcome back.
Well, always glad to be back.
So we're talking about Hippocratic Oath, Call to Arms, and Sacrifice of Angels, all Deep Space Nine episodes that had a core storyline of something to do with the Jem'Hadar. Because it felt like with the 2800 and all of that would be, a good tie-in. So the first one up, we're going to do these in chronological order, is one that I learned to have a new appreciation for during this rewatch, and that is Hippocratic Oath, a Season 4, Episode 4 episode. And this is one, for those of you who might not remember, where Julian and O'Brien are going along in their runabout, and they detect what might be a warp core problem, something like that, and so they go off of course. Next thing you know, of course, they're under attack from the Jem'Hadar. They're brought down to the planet for a crash landing, and chaos ensues. Now, Mav, the key story point around this one was the concept is, could the Jem'Hadar be cured of Ketracel White addiction?
Right.
And what were your impressions when we rewatched this one?
Well, when I rewatched this one, and I got just like you, I learned a different appreciation only because, I went to medic school, so I understand Julian's, striving to do in his mind what's the right thing.
The Hippocratic Oath: do no harm, do the right medical
thing. Do no harm, help the sick and needy. And then, I see, O'Brien conflicting with that. These guys are going to kill us. We're fighting. We're this, that with them.
More of the soldier's perspective.
From the soldier's perspective, which the Jem'Hadar understood O'Brien's position, but was still looking to, Julian's help. Julian's trying to solve things, and then you get that power play, Julian being the lieutenant, and, O'Brien being the chief. It's like, look, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it this way, and this is my order. And you can see O'Brien, has to sit back and then, suck it up. It's not the first time O'Brien's been rank challenged like that before.
Yeah. But it's kind of, there's an extra tension there since there's the friendship.
Yeah.
And it's one of those exchanges where you can see in O'Brien's face that he's not really going to go along with it. Like he's going to do whatever it takes.
You could just tell.
The first time I watched this, I was on Julian's side. I remember that specifically, thinking O'Brien was really being a hothead. This time through, I was with O'Brien through and through, having the full perspective of the Jem'Hadar and what they did throughout the rest of Deep Space Nine. Because back then, they weren't such a threat. They were more of like this new bad guy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we knew they were bad. We knew they were killers, but we didn't have any idea of what kind of chaos they were going to ensue. And this time through, I thought O'Brien was dead on, and I thought there's an exchange where Brian pulls a fast maneuver. He beams out after he has to go back to the shuttle to get a part for Julian. He beams out, and he comes back to rescue Julian, and they have this exchange, and Julian says, "No, you have to leave me behind. I'm not coming." And O'Brien starts to walk away and turns around and shoots the medical equipment.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just like, whoa. That is
Yeah.
it. That was just I
Now
love
you've
that
got
as a
no
statement.
choice because your work is destroyed. Let's go.
Yeah, you
You
gotta
know.
go now. This also was an early Worf episode where
Yes.
where the writers wanted to sort of tie in Worf from TNG and be like, Worf used to be kind of a cop on the Enterprise, but he doesn't really fit in here on Deep Space Nine anymore. And there was a good scene with him and Odo, and he kind of ruined one of Odo's investigations.
Mhm.
So that was fun to kind of tie those episodes together. At the 38-minute mark, that's the moment where Brian says, "You're coming with me," and he shoots Julian's equipment. Love that moment. And of course,
Yeah.
you start to have a much deeper appreciation for the Jem'Hadar's honor system and their structure, and the Vorta, and how the Vorta to them are regaled as like these higher life forms almost. So that was a great episode to sort of dip our toes in with the Jem'Hadar. But then I think we could move right on to Call to Arms, a very action-packed episode of Deep Space Nine.
Very combat heavy.
Season 5, episode 26, cliffhanger here. 26 episodes in these seasons. These were,
these
standard
were long
seasons now are 24.
these were long seasons.
Yeah. Any first thoughts on Call to Arms?
Geez. Well, it's funny. The first original thoughts when I'm watching this is, again, my experience with Deep Space Nine. It's not a series that I watch over and over and over. Next Gen was a series that I can watch over and over.
I'm the same.
So I'm watching this. So it was like watching it for the first time, and I'm seeing, Lita and Rom prepare for their wedding and stuff like that, which is totally unrelated to the what we were talking about. But I found it still comical and funny to watch them go through that.
Yeah.
Go through that whole thing, and then when it all plays down to the evacuating of the station and how they getting everybody off and leaving it to the Bajorans for the Jem'Hadar to occupy without without incident, so that they're trying to get so that nobody gets hurt.
Right, because the Bajoran said this is a great moment where Sisko says to Kira, he says, "You remember that non-aggression pact? I want Bajor to sign it." And it's a total, like, it was back then, it was a total twist, because a few episodes earlier it was a big point of contention and Sisko was going to block that. And that was a big deal. And then all of a sudden, nope, you know what? We got to do what's right for Bajor. You sign it. And then he sets up that program. In fact, I even made a note to myself. I said, if you're ever in Stowe and we come across a program that's called Cisco Program 197, don't ever run it.
Don't click it. Don't ever run it.
It makes a mess. That was a great scene.
Dead Space, yeah.
Oh, another great scene with Sisko in this episode is of pretty soon when they start mining the wormhole, which is the beginning of a 6-episode arc, or a 6-episode arc, I think. They begin mining the wormhole, and of course the Dominion finds out about that pretty quick.
Yeah.
So they send Wei Yung to Deep Space Nine, and Wei Yung beams over, and he's just right up front with Sisko. He says, "You got to shut down that minefield, or we're gonna have a problem." And Sisko says, "I'm not going to shut down that minefield. I guess we have a problem," essentially.
Right.
And then they sort of switch roles. And they start talking about how, well, what if we just agree to do medical shit?
Right. All of a sudden now it becomes a diplomatic meeting.
Right. And he walks out of the room and he says, "Thank you, Captain Sisko. I think this is going to be a historic moment." And the next scene is Sisko briefing the crew. And he's like, "They're about to attack."
Yeah, here goes my BS card.
Yeah. So Sisko's like, the moment we laid the cards on the table, everything after that point was just us to try to lull each other into a false sense of security. A beautiful exchange, and it's exactly what would happen. And it starts to make you appreciate how Sisko's a real thinker. He's thinking a few steps ahead, and he's very smart and he's very knowledgeable about his enemy. So I enjoyed that a lot. And I thought that added a lot of good context to the whole 6-episode arc. But it really comes to a conclusion with Sacrifice of Angels, which is really what the entire 2800 series was directly driven from. Is in the Sacrifice of Angels, it concludes with the Dominion fleet being completely removed from the wormhole, which is where the 2800 then picks off. But before we jump, actually, I thought I'd give a little background information. I forgot I wanted to do this on Call to Arms. This episode features the second battle of Deep Space Nine. And they use a new technique in this one where they sort of transpose the explosions behind and above the models, and they kind of get away with some new explosion techniques. But now that I edit video, I watch with an eye, and you can kind of see how they do it.
Yeah.
Anyways,
what I found myself wondering. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's a great episode. So if you have any thoughts,
no. What I found myself wondering too is, going back to the mechanics of what was in that episode, and going back to some of the things that were in game, and I'm sitting there going, there was that one, I can't remember what it was, not a feature episode, Fleet Action. Thank you. There was that one Fleet Action that was around Deep Space Nine that had that big combat, and I'm sitting there going, why doesn't Deep Space Nine have them upgraded weapons? That would have been awesome to watch actually happen in game, even if it was just a cutscene to watch all the weapons and stuff pop out on Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, that was a really impressive
come
moment.
Into action.
Yeah.
And then I'm also looking at the self-replicating mines. Come on now, those could have been in game, and that would have been an awesome thing to have, especially a mine launcher. Even if it was something a specific console. For
that would just be pure chaos.
I mean, can you? I mean, this back in the day, when crystalline entity used to get mined to death.
Yeah.
It would have just been something where it was just like, well, I have the, self-replicating cloaking mines. We obviously know they have the ability to make cloaking mines. They were actually cloaking tractor mines. So we know the mechanic exists in game. But self-replicating mines, even if it was just for a short time period where it was like for 30 seconds, the mine will replicate X amount of mines and continue to spawn. I thought no more spam. So. I just thought it'd be interesting.
The mines were an interesting concept and something we haven't seen in Trek later on. All right, why don't we talk about Sacrifice of Angels? I started talking about it, but
yes,
this is the conclusion to the 6-story arc, which was the first 6-story arc of the series. And when I'll go down to we're over at Memory Alpha. Of course, everybody knows about Memory Alpha. I don't need to tell you about that. But if you go down to their background information, here it is. When the multi-episode arc was originally conceived, it was just 4 episodes long. But once the writers started to develop ideas and decide where specific plot points needed to go and how things needed to develop, they changed it to a 5-episode arc. But as they started writing the last episode, they're like, we can't fit this into 44 minutes because the last episode was going to be Favor the Bold. They decided to make it a 6-episode arc. And that 6-episode arc was so, what they call, extremely successful that ultimately everyone agreed that it was one of the best things the show ever did. And to conclude that, they do a 10-episode arc at the end of the series, which really, if you think about it, the War with the Dominion we think of the War with the Dominion as this thing that went on all through Deep Space Nine from like season 4 on-ish, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the concentrated goodness in this 6-episode arc and in that final 10-episode arc are really the cornerstone Jem'Hadar Dominion moments in Deep Space Nine.
Right.
So anyway, Sacrifice of Angels also featured for the first time exclusive CG work for the ships. All of those battles, CG for the first time. And they figured it was so much freaking CG work, they needed to split it among 2 houses to get the work done. And they also mentioned that they specifically wanted to have very military-like tactics in this episode. And I thought that was a great point, like where they're trying to pick on the Cardassians and things like that.
Right. Pick them off to get them to break that hole and then run that breach with a blockade run. And, it was a good tactical episode. The combat in space is how, like, I would envision faction versus faction combat when it comes, and this is something that I hope, gets expanded on, and a lot of us, I'm sure, will hope that as well. I hope it's something that gets expanded on when it comes to this game. Instead of it being 5-on-5 or 10-on-10, I mean massive, massive space battles.
Yeah. Like, like Starbase 24 can have just, dozens and dozens and dozens of Klingons. Something like that. It's just groups and groups.
Just on a massive scale.
Yeah.
Also, I'm hoping eventually, I didn't mean to bump the mic. I'm hoping eventually that they introduce a mechanic into STO where once you're dead, you're out of the fight. There is no respawn, come back and join your friends. If you run out of ships, buddy, guess what? You run out of ships. You're done.
I'd be dead in a few minutes.
You've lost. Yeah, no bringing Chris in as the flagship because they'll kill you when the fight's over.
Yeah, I agree, man. That'd be really fun. And did it bug you at all, though, that during these battles, like, apparently none of these ships had shields?
Yeah, they were a little squishier. They were kind of like, well, you're squishy, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and they were flying right between them, and then they would fire and there's just explosions. There
were some great piloting. I mean, we're talking, you've got 4 or 5 galaxy cruisers just kind of toting along through this maze of ships. Nobody's hitting nothing.
Right.
So these are the best piloting computers ever. The Expanse was just that well.
I also really liked. I liked this in this episode. They really in the episode we just talked about, Call to Arms, and in Sacrifice of Angels, they tie in Sisko's baseball, which is a thread throughout the entire series. And whenever the prophets speak to him as "you wish to end the game," they're referring back to what Sisko originally compared life to a baseball game, and so now that's how the prophets refer to life.
That's how they refer to it.
Yeah. And I love the whole thread through the whole thing, and that baseball remains, it's just an interesting character piece that they have for Sisko. It remains throughout the whole series.
What I also found very interesting in following the whole story is when Dukat snaps after his daughter is killed.
Yeah.
The other guy shoots. I actually felt bad for the guy.
Yeah.
Because all he wanted to do was protect his daughter in the very end, and then his one of his flunkies, pops her in the chest and kills her for being a traitor. Well, you heard what she said.
Yeah.
She's a traitor, and just how he's just driven mad. And at the end, I forgive her, and he turns to Sisko when he hands him the ball. I forgive you too. I genuinely felt for the guy.
Yeah.
And it was probably the only time you ever sit there and go, "Aw." But that was short-lived.
It sets up an episode that happens like 6 episodes later, where
Right.
Sisko's taken Dukat in. But it also really establishes the fact that in the background, Deep Space Nine, in a lot of ways, was about the polar opposites of Sisko and Dukat, but also their similarities. Like in The Mirror Darkly, right, where Sisko has to kind of cross the line to convince the Romulans. He's a little more Dukat in that episode, but it's like he knows his spot, and very interesting kind of relationship that starts to develop right there between the two in a way that they'd never really kind of been connected before in the show. Great episode, Sacrifice of Angels. Is one of Deep Space Nine's greats.
Yeah. All three of them were good.
Mav, well, I think that's all the notes I have for this week. Now, we don't have a Talk Trek segment lined up for next week. We're going to take 1 week off because we want to feature community feedback next week. I had a community feedback question I was going to suggest, but was there anything you wanted to chat before we throw it out there?
With the focus on, and this is where I segue into a real quick, on this. Foundry files is a very important thing for us. It's a very important aspect of the game, and with the spotlight on the Foundry now, and they're starting to bring more attention to the Foundry authors. We want to get your missions. We want to see what you got out there, your writing skills, your tips, your tricks, and stuff like that. Send us in your suggestions for missions. If you've played one, that's great. If you've played one that bombed, but it had this is a really interesting effect, send it into us. STOked@JupiterBroadcasting.com. This way, if you've got something or your buddy's got something, showcase your talent, even if it doesn't meet the showcase on the Stoke forums, we'll be able to bring it here on Stoked.
Take a look, right?
Right.
So I thought, Mav, the next week's question for community feedback, I want to get some Q&A in, and we know that the new PvP system is under development.
Mm-hmm.
And things have been pretty quiet from the devs on the information sharing front, but maybe we can offer some suggestions. So I would like to ask the community this. Now that we know PvP is under development, what types of new map functionality would you like to see in the new PvP system? What types of new map functionality would you like to see? Email us your ideas, stoked@JupiterBroadcasting.com. And there you go. If we get some good answers, we'll cover those on next week's episode of Stoked.
Yep.
All right, Mav. Well, I think that just about wraps up this week's episode of Stoked. Special programming note, Stoked will be live at 5 p.m. Pacific. Does that work for you, 5 p.m. Pacific next week?
Absolutely.
So Friday, 5 p.m. Pacific over at jblive.tv. We're moving the show for 1 week to see how Friday fits. So join us live Friday, jblive.tv, 5 p.m. Pacific for Stoked Live. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning to this week's episode of Stoked, and we'll see you right back here next week. Is this really happening?
Great.
Oh,
Yes, it is.
Is this is this how it went in the time you guys played it?
What?
All these cubes?
The guy? Yep.
It's a fucking spectacle. All right, not a cube, not a cube, not a sphere, not a sphere, not a cube, not a sphere, not a sphere, not a cube. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Got it. Oh, under attack. Uh-oh, bad news about my hull integrity, guys. Bad news. Anybody have some emergency fireworks? I could use some emergency fireworks.
There we go.